Big Island Video News covers the arrival of the storied Hokulea voyaging canoe in Hilo Bay, where the crew prepares to embark on a historic journey across the world's oceans. On March 8, 1975, Hokulea was launched. Nainoa Thompson recalled the scene at Kaneohe Bay during his recent talk at Hilo's Imiloa Astronomy Center.
This is an old slide. It was the day before Hokulea was launched, March 8, 1975. It was, I don't know, again for me, I was there, lucky. Herb and Kala helped me get there. It was a different day. It was a different day because you had this 62-foot voyaging canoe that's 22 feet wide, that fully loaded weighs 24,000 pounds, driven by catching wind. And it's going to go to this place called, way over the horizon, called Kahikinui. And it was Hawaiian. And because we don't have those symbols of power and elegance and beauty and strength and promise and of hope. And there was Hokulea on the beach. And the people were gathered there, and it was a time of mostly confusion. I mean, I recall that the community was split. There were those who prayed for this canoe. They loved it. They wanted to touch it. There were those who didn't understand it and didn't care. And to some degree, there were those within the community that feared this canoe because it had the possibility of driving change. And so that we were there, and amongst all of the beauty and the power and the confusion, and there was an awa ceremony. And there was, I grew up in a very Hawaiian family. First time, I was just told, sit in a circle, drink it. And I didn't even like it because I wasn't accustomed to the taste. It was because it wasn't me. It wasn't part of who I was, but had no idea what we were drinking ourselves into this new world. And then this canoe was launched, and it fundamentally changed everything. There was the chance, there was the opportunity, there was the possibilities. It was all there, and there was also amongst all that kind of optimism and hope, there was also the fear that maybe we can't do this. It was also butting up against the question that Hawaiians tend to typically, they're going to ultimately end up going to go fail. And I think underlying all of that, what was there was that kind of nudging you towards a place that so many of us don't like to go to. And that's the place that you're going to be afraid of, fear of failing. And in the fear of failing comes shame. And that shame was part of who we were. And it was all going to be challenged, and it was all going to be tested, and nobody knew whether we would, where we were going to end up. But everybody knew for Hokulea to fulfill its promise, it needed to find Tahiti.
With Herb Kane at the helm, the canoe sailed around the Hawaiian Islands. Sam Lowe describes a stop at Honaunau in South Kona.
We came into Honaunau Bay and dropped the hook, and the next day people started coming and coming and coming, Herb recalls. I thought the island was going to tilt. You could not see a rock. It was all solid people. They weren't doing anything. They weren't waving. They were just sitting there looking at the canoe. There was some kind of communication going on between the canoe and the people. It was wild. It went on for a couple of days. The faces would change, but the crowd was still there. Wherever we went, it was that way. That's what told me everything was all right. The crew noticed it too, a kind of reverence emanating from the crowds that gathered to greet Hokulea. Billy Richards got on board at Honaunau, and he remembers the crowd's reaction as a kind of stunned silence, as if they were in the presence of, as he calls it, the spaceship of our ancestors. Hokulea evoked something deep in people everywhere we went, Billy recalls. It was interesting. The Honaunau people were coming to picnic, bringing their families down. We asked them to come on the canoe, and no, it was just enough for them to see it. When Hokulea sailed into Honaunau, she fulfilled a prophecy that had been given to Auntie Clara, a respected Hawaiian elder. One day, her grandfather told her, you will see a Hawaiian double canoe sail into the bay. And so it was. Every day during the canoe's visit to Honaunau, Auntie Clara showed up with Boy, her pet pig, to sit on the same rock and gaze out at the canoe. Auntie Clara was one of the local fixtures at Honaunau, Herb remembers. She was excited. She must sail with us. I wasn't prepared to take an 80-year-old woman on board, but she was not to be denied. So when we sailed up along the coast to Kailua Kona, she went with us, and she kept up a historical commentary all along the way, pointing out different things along the shore. The crew arrived in Kailua on the morning of the big canoe race. We were coming around the point by Kamakahono, John Cruz remembers, and everybody just stopped racing. They were going around a turn, and they saw this big canoe, and they just stopped the whole race. They were in awe. They put their paddles up like in a salute.
The inaugural voyage left Honaunau Bay, Maui, on May 1st, 1976. Navigator Mau Pialug led Hokulea to Tahiti using only his traditional knowledge and skills, and the arrival was hailed as a triumph for Hawaiian culture.
17,000 Tahitians. So many children got on the back end of Hokulea that it actually sunk it in the shallow water. And we're there in English trying to politely ask them, can you get off? Because we got to take care of the canoe. But it didn't matter because it wasn't our canoe. We flew to a place that they spoke the native language, that had the orators, that remembered the great epic voyages, that knew the great canoes, that knew the names of the great navigators and captains, but didn't have the canoe. And these stories are tested over time and become weaker and weaker over time, move more from the reality of who we are as a people to mythology. So Hokulea's arrival changed everything because it empowered all of that. This canoe was not a Hawaiian canoe anymore. It was a Pacific canoe. But the thing that was the most important about the moment was all of a sudden you were part of the larger family, the larger ohana. This is ancestral. It's deep, and connections are beginning to be pulled together. It changed everything. Nobody went home the same.
During the presentation, Nainoa Thompson noticed some of the crew members of the Hokulea's first voyage in the audience. He invited John Cruz up to say a few words.
John, can you come in the front, please? And Snake and Tawa, please. You know, John should be doing this presentation, not me. He was on this canoe on that voyage. So,
I was telling Snake up there, boy, that old picture, that's me in the end. That's me at the end on the back of the canoe. I was thinking, man, looks like a Chinese laundry. Nice. But I'm, again, honored to see this, to speak to you. And today we went up to Keoho, Mauka to plant koa trees. And we've been trying to do this for the last... No, we've done it 20 years ago. And I wanted to get up to the place where my son and I planted these koa trees. But we didn't do that today, but still pretty nice place up there.
Sam Lowe retold accounts describing Tava Taupu and Abraham Snake Ahi, two voyagers who were also in the audience that night.
Nainoa was comfortable with all of his crewmates, but he felt a special connection with his old friend, Snake Ahi. Snake was generous to a fault, naturally caring and considerate. He worked hard and said little, except to smile and make light of some difficult moment. And what a smile. Snake's serene face broadcasts goodwill, and when he's happy or telling a joke, which he did often, accompanied by soft laughter. He's comfortable at sea, and there were many aboard who could cook, Keani, Penny, Lele, and Maka'ala among them. But if a vote were taken for best cook, it would be Snake. You got to sail with a guy to really appreciate him, Gordon recalls. He cooked and stood his watches. I told him I would take him off the watch list, but he said no. I had prepared myself intellectually to be able to ask questions of the ocean in the canoe, Nainoa says. Snake is much more intuitive. Snake is the epitome of the true ocean man. You can see it in his eyes. You can see it in his hair and his skin. He's a quiet man, very thoughtful, deep. Most of the crew members would focus their steering on the compass. They'd watch that needle. They would not pay that much attention to the rest of the world around them, just hold that needle in its place. But Snake would watch it the least. He used all his senses to steer the canoe. When he held the paddle, it was like he was holding the canoe through the shaft of that paddle. His steering was very soft. He made very small corrections. Some people pulled the paddle up quickly to let the canoe run up into the wind, then pushed it down hard to bring it off. Snake's corrections were always very small, and they were very soft. When he steered, the canoe was quiet. When Hokulea docked in Kailua, Tava Taupu was working at the Kona Village Hotel, carving intricate kihi and doing general maintenance. Tava was born in the Marquesas. When he was a teenager, he traveled to Tahiti to learn to carve ki'i from an uncle. Papeete, the capital, was a place where young Tahitians liked to rough up boys from the outlying islands, so Tava learned to box. When I went boxing, I got proud, Tava recalls. I was amateur, 6 rounds. I won't drink anymore. I exercise, forget kid stuff, no more smoking cigarettes. What Tava doesn't say is that he boxed so well he earned the title of heavyweight champion of French Polynesia. After Tava had immigrated to Hawaii, he settled down to become an American. He expected he might lose some connection to his Polynesian roots. But when he saw Hokulea, the opposite happened. It all comes back to me, he remembers. My ancestors. I feel my ancestors all around me.
Nainoa was not on the first leg of the voyage to Tahiti, but he was on the return trip, which, without Mao, was navigated using modern methods and tools. There were no plans for another voyage, but as Thompson said, the sea kept calling.
And again, I mean, I guess it's difficult to imagine that you're coming back to a place that doesn't have schools in fish ponds or in lo'i. It doesn't have language immersion schools. It doesn't have big Ali'i Trust education schools that are focused on Hawaiian culture. You don't have that. You don't have places where you can go where Hawaiian culture is celebrated. So when you step off the canoe, like us, we have nothing to go back to after being in the wake of our ancestors. And so as powerful the voyage was, there was a deep yearning to continue. The voyage was exhausting to leadership. The voyage was initially focused, as powerful the vision was a one voyage only in 1976 as Hawaii's contribution to America's bicentennial. There was no vision for the second voyage. In fact, Hokulea was in the exhaustion and the absence of vision and the exhaustion of leadership stepping away because they had to. Hokulea, I remember just one of the stories. She was tied up in Kealohi Point by Heia in this little inlet in the reef, and the mangroves had grown over the mass, and the fresh water had, because our masts were made out of fur, and fresh water got in, and me and a couple other guys with an amazing ocean man by the name of Wally Froyseth pulled it out of the bushes and took it back to Honolulu Harbor. The mast broke because of the water, because of the lack of care, and but we took it back to Honolulu Harbor for a number of things. The canoe needed to be cared for, but also those who were down on the road to Tahiti, those who came back home from there, those who had the ability to reach down deep inside to be a part of who you were, but to come home and not have that, you need to go back in the ocean again.
Join us all week as Big Island Video News continues our coverage of Hokulea in Hilo. Tomorrow, Hokulea hits hard times. Eddie Aikau and the ill-fated second voyage of the Hokulea.